We begin our today's session with a recitation from the Holy Quran.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
Assalamu alaikum and very good morning, everyone. My name is Imran. I'm a research analyst at the Institute of Regional Studies. On behalf of the President of the Institute, Ambassador Jaspal, and Team IRS, I extend a very warm welcome to all the participants. Series in which we have invited Lieutenant General Khalid and Kidwai, who would be speaking on a very important subject, strategic stability in South Asia amid changing geopolitical realities. Thank you, Jaspal, for your time, for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first ever visit of Jaspal to this institute, and it's really an honor for us to host your talk today. Ladies and gentlemen, we have also invited Professor Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal for his special remarks on the subject. Dr. Jaspal is currently a Dean of Social Sciences and Professor at the School of Politics and International Relations at Khalid University. He has also authored a book titled Nuclear Arms Control in South Asia, Politics, Postures, and Practices. Thank you, Dr. for your time. I would like to emphasize here that this is a great opportunity, especially for the students coming from different universities, to interact and learn from both the practitioner and an academic. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our today's guest today. General Saab has led a meritorious military services spanning over 54 years. He has held a variety of prestigious command, staff, and instruction appointments during his service. After the May 1998 nuclear test, General Kidwai pioneered the establishment of Pakistan's National Command Authority, NCA, and was appointed as the founding director of Journal of Strategic Plans Divisions, SPD, in December 1998. He served as DG SPD for over 15 years, and since 2014, he is an advisor to the National Command Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, as DG SPD, General Saab conceived, articulated, and executed Pakistan's nuclear policy and deterrence doctrine and translated these doctrines into a robust nuclear force structure, oversaw and ensured the establishment of Army, Navy, and Air Force strategic force commands, including the development of a variety of nuclear weapons. He put in place the state-of-the-art command and control system, as well as an effective nuclear security regime for Pakistan's strategic assets. He is also the architect of Pakistan's Civilian Nuclear Energy Vision 2050. General Kidwai has also awarded Pakistan's highest civil award, the Nishani-e-Imtiaz, and the second highest civil award, Hilali-e-Imtiaz, in addition to Hilali-e-Imtiaz military. Ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over the floor to General Saab, I would request my IIT team to play a recorded message from IRS President Ambassador Jaspal Saab, who is currently abroad for urgent meeting. Please listen to his message.
It's a pleasure and privilege to have amongst us today General Kidwai, who is an institution unto himself on this very important subject that we will be discussing with us today. Prolonged conflicts amongst nuclear-armed nations in South Asia, with shifting regional and global geostrategic dynamics, threaten the region's stability. Countries in the region are working to develop nuclear trials, that is, land, air, and sea missile delivery systems, enhance capacity for a second strike. Frequent use of advanced weapons, such as hypersonic, multiple independent targeted military vehicles or MERS, hypersonic technological demonstrator vehicles, HTSTDVs, typical sea-based systems, and dual and capable nuclear systems have transformed deterrence concepts, potentially altering the nuclear strategies and doctrines of regional states. The rise of strategies such as full stop, limited war, and surgical strikes is linked to the evolution of these sophisticated weapons. The evolving dynamics of strategic stability are creating a cascading security dilemma, where deterrence efforts against one industry increases the security of another. India has recently started using the MERV and HST series in its missiles and development state and its state-of-the-art satellite surveillance systems with the help of the US. In addition, India's ultra-nationalistic policies and the escalation of terrorism in South Asia deepens mistrust amongst nuclear states, prompting more aggression or more aggressive postures. The deteriorating relationship between China and India, as well as Pakistan and India, the world will use China primarily in the Indo-Pacific, underscores the critical need for renewed initiatives to mitigate nuclear risks and foster strategic stability discussions among extreme nuclear powers. Given that, with that backdrop, it's imperative to the subject of strategic stability of South Asia, a region which houses 1/4 of the world population. And if you include the adjacent regions, including China, Central Asia, Afghanistan, and parts of the Middle East, we'll be talking of another quarter of the world population. So in total, half of the world population. So given that, it is very important that strategic stability of South Asia is maintained and strengthened. But given the implications of the advancements in technologies and the new concepts that I have outlined earlier, it is very important to understand how the strategic stability will play out in this region in the coming years, and what can be done to enhance the prospects of peace. There is no other person better equipped in terms of knowledge and expertise on the subject to discuss that and give us an overview. So there are not many people in Pakistan or in this region better equipped to discuss this important subject in all its various dimensions and manifestations, and provide an insight which has been mostly missing on the discussion of the public discussion on this particular topic. I welcome General Kidwai and very much appreciate his coming to IRS and sharing his wisdom and insight on this important topic. Thank you.
With that, I would like to invite General Kidwai Sahab to please address. The Nasir Yasin, Mr. Zahir Kazmi, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I indeed do feel greatly honored to have been invited to deliver a talk at the prestigious Institute of Regional Studies, Islamabad. The topic given to me is South Asian strategic stability amid changing geopolitical realities. I find the topic most apt given the dynamic and relatively fluid regional and global geopolitical environments of today and in the foreseeable future. While it is true that global and regional geopolitics invariably remain in a flux almost all the time, however, as of today, there are a number of regional and global geopolitical realities which can be categorized as dynamic and relatively fluid. I would first like to dwell over some of these as I see them, and which are likely to impact South Asian strategic stability in one way or another in the future. Thereafter, I shall cover the essential elements or ground realities that compel the preservation of strategic stability in South Asia, howsoever fragile it might seem at times. First, the recent Indian elections, which have reduced considerably the earlier overwhelming majority of the BJP and Prime Minister Modi, with a dependency on non-BJP parliamentary members and cabinet partners of a coalition government, together with a strong opposition, while one can perhaps expect some breaks on Modi's so far unfettered, acrid, autocratic, and divisive domestic policies of Hindutva, especially against the Muslims. But as far as Kashmir and aggressive behavior against Pakistan is concerned, my sense is that nothing good should be expected, despite the BJP's reduced mandate. Today is also the 5th of August, marking 5 years of international shame, when India revoked Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, and there was deafening silence as the international community, conveniently looking the other way, became partners in the crime. The otherwise loud international voices for the respect for human rights, liberty, freedom, equality remained silent. Brutal occupation of Kashmir and brutality against the Kashmiris continues unabated. That is the geopolitical reality. Pakistan should be under no illusion. 25 years of the Kargil conflict were celebrated by India with a display of ever more anti-Pakistan venom by no less than Narendra Modi himself. I would label his meaningless rhetoric and hollow warnings to Pakistan as a public display of frustration at the inability of the large Indian military to deliver against Pakistan. The nuclear factor closed that chapter a long time ago. He tried the Indian Air Force in February 2019 at Balakot, only to suffer humiliation at the hands of the Pakistan Air Force. I shall be surprised if there is a toning down of India's aggressive policy against Pakistan and in occupied Kashmir. Strategic stability between the neighbors will therefore remain tentative and under stress, with bouts of hot and cold seasons. Pakistan must continue to look out for its security, both on the eastern borders as well as internally against the Indian-sponsored fifth generation warfare, which is being waged full steam on our western borders and provinces. Because India's direct conventional force options on the eastern borders stand curtailed due to the effects of deterrence generated by Pakistan's robust nuclear capability, India has strategized fifth generation warfare as a low-cost option to bleed Pakistan. This again is a ground reality that must be countered internally
with a judicious and forceful combination of political, economic, and military strategies, both short-term and long-term. As for an external maneuver against the power which is waging this war with complete impunity, in my view, in this type of warfare too, as in classic conventional operations, the retaliatory options of offensive defense, of counterattack, counteroffensive, and riposte are equally valid in order to force a recoil on the adversary's hybrid strategy. Defensive alone never had and never will have any future in any type of warfare, except to accumulate more and more casualties and statistics. Unless similar or more pain is inflicted in areas of vulnerabilities of the adversary, which are innumerable, the one-sided onslaught will unfortunately continue open-ended. Pakistan cannot afford to bleed and hemorrhage indefinitely. Enough ought to be enough. Strategic stability in the unchallenged fifth generation war front on Pakistan ought to be restored as well. Next, the upcoming US elections in November. The outcome will have a direct bearing on the state of strategic stability in South Asia. With the standing down of Joe Biden as the Democratic presidential nominee, the contest between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump has introduced a number of imponderables and has energized the presidential race. A Trump victory is no longer taken for granted, and the Democrats seem to have suddenly found their mojo. Some of the polls reflect that. Although there are still a little over 3 months to go, as of now, it seems that the contest might eventually be close to call. Irrespective of who wins, however, the US-India strategic partnership, which has been carefully built over the last nearly 2 decades, will remain largely on course, as the common challenge and denominator for the US and India will remain a rising China. The US particularly has so overinvested in this partnership that it has been left with very little leverage to prevent India from playing all sides to its advantage. India continues to maintain excellent relations with Russia. It maintains a neutral policy on Ukraine to the great discomfort of the West. It feels free to strengthen its position in BRICS and SCO. It works on the de-dollarization drive as it pleases, and much more. The West can only watch quite helplessly. The US-India strategic relationship has become more of a US compulsion than an Indian need, and India is milking that quite smartly. As a result, the consequences of the relationship create strategic stability in South Asia because it enables the induction in India of a variety of new and high technologies, modern weaponry, and an Indian push to seek advantages in the nuclear field, both military and civil. These work to the disadvantage of Pakistan's security calculus and compels Pakistan to take necessary steps in order to maintain strategic stability. In the area of nuclear diplomacy, however, while there are differences in approach and nuances on international strategic issues between the Republicans and the Democrats, the Conference on Disarmament and the CD being one example, one can be certain that Pakistan's nuclear program is likely to remain in focus irrespective of the winner. This is not new to Pakistan, and we have, I think, over the years learned to live with it. Domestically, the nuclear program enjoys a wide national consensus as being central to Pakistan's national security. The nuclear program is owned by the Pakistani street. That is its inherent strength. The nuclear program has matured immensely in a variety of operational and technical capabilities of high quality, thereby generating the necessary deterrence effects in restricting and limiting India's military options to the point of neutralizing its large military machine. That, again, is the ground reality in a changing geopolitical environment. Irrespective of the winner in the US elections, therefore, Pakistan should nevertheless be prepared to witness old wine being served to it in even older bottles. We will need to pursue strategic policies which will ensure that strategic stability in South Asia is not disturbed to our disadvantage. This again will not be new to Pakistan's policy planners because I have said on a number of occasions, the responsibility to maintain strategic stability in South Asia has always fallen squarely on Pakistan. That has been the ground reality for all the 77 years of Pakistan's existence and will remain so as the ultimate security challenge in the future as well. There is no running away from it. Historically speaking, strategic stability in South Asia has been dynamic as well as elusive. The interplay between the underlying dangers because of the Kashmir conflict and the compulsions of deterrence because of South Asia's nuclearization has nevertheless ensured the maintenance of relative peace and stability ever since India's aggression against Pakistan in 1971. Some strategists term this as a state of no war, no peace. However, this state of no war, no peace has often encountered slippery slopes over the decades, lurching frequently and dangerously towards strategic instability rather than strategic stability. Over the last 5 decades plus, particularly, the South Asian strategic reality has been that it is Pakistan that, by default, has shouldered the responsibility of maintaining the vital strategic balance in the conventional and nuclear equation with India as the critical determinant of the state of strategic stability in South Asia. If Pakistan were to allow imbalances to be introduced in the strategic equation, South Asia would list towards serious strategic instability. And over the decades, therefore, it has become a Pakistani responsibility not to allow the South Asian strategic stability equation to be disturbed to its disadvantage. In the future, too, Pakistan's full spectrum deterrence capability will continue to ensure that strategic stability in South Asia will prevail and that instability will not be allowed to be induced. Because of the nuclearized strategic environments, the logic of mutually assured destruction, MAD, will remain as relevant in South Asia as it is in Europe, transatlantic, and trans-Pacific. Now, when we talk of the notion of strategic stability in South Asia amid changing geopolitical realities, any discussion will be incomplete without considering China in the debate. In the changing geopolitical milieu of today's global order, or perhaps disorder, in addition to the US and Russia as superpowers, it is the third superpower of our era, China, which is emerging, some say has emerged as the brand new superpower, posing multiple challenges to US hegemony in the political, economic, military, and technological spheres, and now making soft diplomatic inroads even in areas of traditional US influence. The world has gradually but surely moved towards multipolarity. Consider some of the following. The diplomatic coup by China in an area of traditional US influence, the Middle East. The rapprochement of bringing together Saudi Arabia and Iran to re-establish not only broken diplomatic relations, but also revive and honor a number of past agreements that the two sides had worked out but suspended years ago. The 25 years US dollar 400 billion agreement with Iran to help build Iran's transportation and manufacturing infrastructure and develop Iran's oil, gas, and petrochemical sectors. The serious consideration by Saudi Arabia to acquire nuclear power plants from China. The growing list of countries lining up to join the Chinese-led BRICS and the SCO as attractive forums for economic development. The de-dollarization drive with countries, including India, conducting trade and commerce in Chinese yuan, Russian rubles, and other non-USD currencies. The political steadfastness and determination backed up by strong military force and sustained show of force with which China has stood its ground on Taiwan and the South China Sea in order to preserve its vital national security interests points very clearly towards the coming of age of China as a superpower. Even though in its traditional cultural humility, China does not claim that status. And now the latest diplomatic coup of sorts of bringing together on one political platform the estranged Hamas and the Fatah groups who have signed under the Chinese auspices in Beijing a unity deal for the establishment of an interim national reconciliation government. All in all, one gets a general sense of which way the wind might be blowing, now and in the future, as China continues to bide its time. China's conduct of foreign policy is mature, assured, and it remains confident of itself. It is exercising its traditional strategic patience in order to assert its global position of eminence through the tools of its economic power, its soft global reach, and growing military, nuclear, and technological prowess. Pakistan must find it comforting that it is aligned, I think, on the right side of history, as it evolves right before our eyes. We must not falter on this. Now, what does it all imply for South Asia and by extension for South Asian strategic stability? At the strategic and military level, India's strategic fiasco against China in Doklam, Arunachal Pradesh, and then in Ladakh and Galwan in 2020 carries serious security and operational implications for not only India's northern front, but also for India's western front with Pakistan, the line of control, and its Siachen positions with a potential two-front war scenario. To recall, China picked up India's challenge in the early summer of 2020 and moved in at several key fronts on the undemarcated line of actual control in Ladakh in order to establish its writ on the ground, dominate the Indian lines of communications to the sensitive northern sector of Dalak Lake Voldi and Siachen Glacier. China cut India and its surprise military to size in the full glare of international publicity without firing a bullet. India was humiliated with sticks, hammers, swords, and stones. The US and the West simply watched. They made no attempt to rescue India. India was let down by its military and its so-called international friends. Modi had no choice but to lie with a straight face to the world and to the Indian public. And I quote, "No post has been lost and no territory has been lost," unquote. The so-called disengagement publicized by India is nothing more than the formalization and freezing of the strategic territorial reverses suffered by India. India's strategic overreach against China on the line of actual control compelled India to restore the ceasefire on the line of control with Pakistan in order to offset a possible two-front war scenario. The arrogant rhetoric to take Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan mellowed down with time because of ground realities. As of today, it remains exactly that. Political rhetoric born out of frustration and political compulsion. In my opinion, strategic stability in South Asia, especially from Pakistan's viewpoint, has been well served because of the consequences of India's strategic overreach against China. With committed deployments of the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh in the east, a portion of the Indian military is likely to remain fixed in the northern front of nearly 3,700 kilometers for the foreseeable future, with an additional logistical burden under extreme weather conditions far greater than that required to sustain Indian positions at Siachen. All in all, that eases pressures against Pakistan, creating a relatively greater equilibrium and balance in the strategic stability paradigm. Now, having discussed some of the changing geopolitical realities and the effects on South Asian strategic stability, I shall now highlight the elements that ensure the maintenance of strategic stability in South Asia. Up until 1971, Pakistan relied on its conventional forces for maintaining operational balance and strategic ability in South Asia. The 1965 war, but more so the disastrous 1971 war, however, drove home some bitter strategic lessons and the realization that conventional force asymmetry was tilted in favor of India, will always remain tilted in favor of India, and there was no way that Pakistan could alter that in its favor, given the imbalance in national power potential between India and Pakistan. As is well known now, Pakistan's political leadership post-1971 took the key strategic decision of embarking on the path of developing nuclear weapons as the great equalizer to India's conventional force asymmetry, a strategic equalizer for all times that would ensure the end of aggression from India. The scientists and engineers of Pakistan were challenged in 1972 to embark upon and deliver a nuclear weapons capability to the nation for its ultimate security. It was a historic strategic decision, and the rest is history. The Indian nuclear explosion Pokhara-1 in May 1974 was in a sense God sent, in that it added a sense of urgency and purpose to Pakistan's pursuit of a nuclear weapons capability. The twin events of the traumatic 1971 war and Pokhara-1 of 1974 became the catalysts for laying the foundations of a lasting and credible strategic stability paradigm in South Asia. Pakistan fulfilled its responsibility in style, when in May 1998, Pakistani scientists and engineers responded to India's 5 nuclear tests of Pokhara-2 with 6 of Pakistan's Chagi-1. On 28th and 30th May 1998, Pakistan's brilliant and legendary scientists and engineers conducted 6 tests of Pakistan's different nuclear devices. These scientific experiments were not only successful, but also restored the strategic balance in South Asia. Pakistan proudly became the seventh nuclear weapons power in the world. Conventional force asymmetry was taken care of and perhaps buried forever. In the strategic and technical evolutionary process, it has taken over 5 decades of vision, planning, scientific excellence, astute strategic management, and selfless patriotism to have brought Pakistan today to a stage where no power can challenge our sovereignty and integrity through kinetic aggression. In the last 2 decades particularly, Pakistan's nuclear program has been labeled as the fastest growing in the world and acknowledged for its quality as being ahead of India. We wear that badge with pride and offer no apologies because it secures Pakistan from external aggression. The nuclear tests of May 98, however, brought new implications for the management and development of our nuclear capability. By establishing a strategic balance in the region and sufficiently neutralizing India's conventional abilities to wage war, the event is a watershed in the evolution of our nuclear developmental cycle. When you look at the macro picture of 52 years, Pakistan's nuclear project can be neatly divided into 2 clear eras. One, the period from 1972 to May 1998, spanning 26 years, which saw the right political decisions being taken across a unified political spectrum, irrespective of the personalities of governments in power, breathtaking scientific milestones and breakthroughs being achieved, and super diplomacy, providing a diplomatic cover and shielding the national nuclear effort from external harm. All those who participated and delivered in the national effort are Pakistan's heroes. The second nuclear era of Pakistan's nuclear project commenced from the post-May 1998 test period and can be counted till as of today, spanning the next 26 years. In this second era, we picked up the threads of the nuclear project seamlessly from the end of the first era, when the scientists validated Pakistan's nuclear capability through nuclear tests. The work in this second era was carried forward through logical and chronological stages of conceiving, developing, and securing Pakistan's nuclear capability in order to convert it into a robust, comprehensive, operationalized capability based on a variety of nuclear weapons and their integration through a professionally conceived C4I2SR, which stands for Command, Control, Communications, Computers, Intelligence, Information, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance. As a consequence, Pakistan's nuclear deterrence capabilities today are based on a well-balanced triad of strategic forces, based on land, air, and sea-based capabilities with deter aggression comprehensively. These operate under the umbrella of a strong command and control system under the National Command Authority, the NCA, headed by the Prime Minister. The Strategic Plans Division, the SPD, is a full-time one-window secretariat and are articulated through the policy of full-spectrum deterrence. I'll now briefly dwell upon the articulation and implications of Pakistan's nuclear policy of full-spectrum deterrence and how it acts to keep India's aggressive designs in check. Immediately on establishment of the NCA and the SPD in early 1999, the policy of credible minimum deterrence was adopted as being pragmatic and dynamic. These 3 words, credible, minimum, deterrence, they reflected the conservative operational and developmental policy objectives, especially keeping in view threat assessment of the time. The early strategic force goals emanated from this assessment. In the ensuing decade, however, from the year 2000 to 2011, operational and force developmental policies of our adversary remained dynamic under the pretext of a China threat and continued to develop on an ominous trajectory, thereby affecting the dynamics of a strategic balance. Pakistan was therefore compelled to keep the policy of credible minimum deterrence dynamic as well. Since then, with the development of a variety of ballistic missiles, the tactical nuclear weapon Nasr, together with a family of highly accurate low-flying cruise missiles Babar and Rad, for a variety of land, air, sea, and undersea platforms, the long-range Shaheen 3 with a range of 2750 kilometers, the Ababil with a multiple independently targeting re-entry vehicle, MIRV, capability. By 2011, the entire spectrum of nuclear weapons was covered horizontally and vertically. India's vast eastern and southern geographical dimensions were therefore fully covered. And today, Alhamdulillah, Pakistan's full spectrum deterrence capability while generally remaining within the larger philosophy of credible minimum deterrence, comprises horizontally of a robust services inventory of a variety of nuclear weapons, a triad, if you may. It is held on land with the Army Strategic Force Command, the ASFC, at sea with the Naval Strategic Force Command, the NSFC, and in the air with the Air Force Strategic Command, the AFSC. Vertically, the nuclear spectrum encapsulates progressively increasing destructive weapon yields and range coverage at three tiers: strategic, operational, and tactical, all the way to 2750 kilometers, so as to cover India's vast eastern and southern geographical dimensions, including its outlying territories. Cumulatively, there is an awesome amount of deterrent nuclear power available to the NC and the SPD. It enables Pakistan to effectively deter aggression through smart deterrence strategy in the first and second strike modes. The capabilities enhance Pakistan's response options, both for peacetime and pre-war deterrence, and if ever deterrence is challenged by the adversary, for intra-war deterrence. The nuclear force development strategy was designed to enable a powerful full-spectrum deterrence, and on that it has delivered. We can also conclude from the formidable nuclear inventories of both India and Pakistan as to why the balance of terror brings into play the larger concept of mutually assured destruction in any potential conflict, leading to mutual deterrence, which in turn compels the antagonists to hold their peace. Specifically, the policy of full spectrum deterrence implies some of the following: that Pakistan possesses the full spectrum of nuclear weapons in three categories: strategic, operational, and tactical, with full range coverage of the large Indian landmass and its outlying territories. There is no place for India's strategic weapons to hide. That Pakistan possesses a full range of weapons yield coverage and the numbers strongly secured to deter the adversary's policy of massive retaliation. Pakistan's counter-massive retaliation will therefore be as severe, if not more. And thirdly, that Pakistan retains the liberty of choosing from a full spectrum of targets in a target-rich India, notwithstanding the Indian BMD or the Russian S-400, to include counter-value, counter-force, and battlefield targets. By developing a full spectrum deterrence capability, we have reinforced deterrence at all levels, re-restored the disturbed strategic balance, thereby ensuring that peace will prevail. Cold start doctrine or proactive operations have been checked, and therefore my preference to call Pakistan's strategic weapons, especially the tactical weapons, as weapons of peace. The conclusion to be drawn is that Pakistan's full spectrum deterrence is alive and effective. It generates the strategic deterrence effects for which it was conceived, that is deterrence against all-out war. Full spectrum deterrence generates deterrence effects literally on daily and hourly basis in deterring a major war. In the Balakot Rajouri skirmish of February 2019, you'll recall, full spectrum deterrence was effective as a robust capability lurking in the background, imposing caution and restraint on the indiscriminate employment of conventional forces on both actors, India and Pakistan, as well as compelling soft international intervention. Pakistan displayed restraint and maturity as a nuclear power in diffusing the Indian-generated tensions, thereby preventing South Asia from spiraling into potential catastrophes. It will be foolhardy for India to take Pakistan's restraint and maturity as a weakness and continue to test the limits of strategic stability. Let me emphasize, however, that Pakistan's nuclear capability and the policy of full spectrum deterrence were never designed to deter isolated tactical operations, nor can they. And therefore, we'll have to learn to live with tactical operations on the line of control with fluctuating intensities, but we can be certain that full spectrum deterrence will not allow events to get dangerously out of hand. Before I end, I would like to place before you a South Asian chronological politico-military perspective of the last 5 decades since the 1980s in support of the conclusion that I have drawn regarding the gradual rendering as irrelevant of India's strong conventional forces in the war-fighting paradigm of South Asia. I have talked about it on a few forums lately, and I would like to present this perspective here too, in order to drive home the point that I'm making. When we juxtapose the strategic effects of Pakistan's nuclear capability as it has developed over the years, we can discern a pattern of effects that have been generated in each decade ever since on India's political choices with Pakistan, as well as resultantly on the large Indian military machine and its options of offensive operations against Pakistan. First, we can discern that during the past 3 or 4 decades, India's political approach to Pakistan has undergone a sea change because of the ground reality of a nuclear Pakistan. India's politicians have had to gradually reconcile to the futility of attempting to coerce Pakistan through direct strategies. India has therefore adopted indirect strategies like hybrid warfare and fifth generation warfare to hurt Pakistan internally and at the western borders, which I think is a deflective reaction to Pakistan nuclear capability, having deterred the possibility of major operations on our eastern border. That Pakistan is finding a degree of incohesion and imbalance in responding effectively to the indirect Indian strategies ought to be a matter of serious concern to Pakistan's political military leadership. I have expressed my views on it earlier. Second, because of Pakistan's robust nuclear capability, India's military doctrines too have been compelled, I repeat for emphasis, India's military doctrines too have been compelled over the last 4 decades to grudgingly but gradually adjust to the ground reality of a Pakistani full spectrum deterrence capability, visible quite clearly over the horizon in support of and at the back of its strong conventional forces, duly integrated into Pakistan's deterrence and security strategies. India's conventional war-fighting military doctrines therefore started to get real and have transited and regressed in terms of curtailment of political military objectives, in terms of time and space, scale of war, notions of victory, war-fighting doctrines, and tactics, etc. Example, from General K. Sundarji's gung-ho, mechanize, mobilize, and hit doctrine, based on blitzkrieg tactics, and laid out ever so cleverly in 1986-87 in the deserts of Rajasthan, under the cover of the infamous exercise Brass Tacks, with the strategic objective of cutting Pakistan's vital north-south lines of communications, to General V.P. Malik's and General Padmanabhan's mantra of limited war while remaining within Pakistan's nuclear thresholds, as in the failed Operation Parakram of 2001 and 2. Please note the climb down. Limited war, not an ambitious deep blitzkrieg operation inside Pakistan, as conceived earlier by General K. Sundarji. To the lukewarm and reluctant partial military mobilization of the Indian military subsequent to the Mumbai attacks of 2008, this was neither here nor there. To the stillborn cold start doctrine, which effectively got neutralized with the first test of Pakistan Nasr missile as a tactical nuclear weapon in 2011, besides a series of smart operational responses by Pakistan in the conventional domain. Then to the pathetic specter of the late General Bipin Rawat's fake strategic strike of 2016, which remains a mystery till today. And finally reduced to the humiliation of the Indian Air Force's Balakot strategic strike of 26 February 2019, which was anything but, and the resultant IAF losses when the PF struck back in full force the next day through Operation Swift Retort. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was a neat and surgical demonstration of Pakistan's retaliatory policy of quid pro quo plus in the conventional domain, backed up by a nuclear full spectrum deterrence at its back. And now in 2024, 5 years since the last Indian humiliation of February 2019, we have again started to hear murmurs about a dynamic response strategy, a DRS, being crafted by desperate Indian military planners based essentially on the hackneyed and failed strategic strikes formula at the tactical level across the line of control or even the international borders. Dynamic response strategy is clearly a reflection of the limits and constraints imposed by Pakistan's robust nuclear capability on India's strategic and operational options. That about sums up the net effect on India's gradually eroded military options inside 4 decades. From the high point of the 86-87 blitzkrieg-like plans to cut Pakistan into half, to today's low point of limited strategic strikes and nothing more, is some reality check and climb down for a military which the West thinks it can set up as a net security provider in the region and a bulwark against China. When seen against the reality of the gradual erosion and regression of India's political military options in the real world of today's South Asian strategic balance, to me it sounds comical and quixotic to hear India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh threatening that India will chase infiltrators inside Pakistani territory. And then for the born-again Hindutva Foreign Minister Jaishankar to say that Pakistan's nuclear capability should be ignored while planning to take Azad Kashmir and get with Baltistan. Such statements at the highest political levels can only fall in the category of political rhetoric and pathetic bluster born out of the frustration of seeing one of the world's largest militaries deterred because of Pakistan's robust nuclear capability. They forget the fantastic tea that was served to Abhinandan the last time the Indians came chasing terrorists inside Pakistan. That does not, however, mean that the threat should not be taken seriously by Pakistan. In conclusion, I would like to say that one can see quite clearly that Pakistan's inventory of a variety of nuclear weapons across the entire spectrum of the deterrence paradigm from strategic to operational to tactical has strengthened Pakistan's hand enormously and allowed Pakistan to transit to the policy of full spectrum deterrence, creating strategic and operational dilemmas for the adversary. As a consequence, strategic stability in South Asia prevails and will inshallah continue to prevail irrespective of changing geopolitical realities. I would also like to conclude by recalling that nearly 80 years of geopolitical and military history post-World War II reinforces the universal wisdom that nuclear powers do not fight direct wars. I do not see any reason why a sane South Asia would want to defy that logic and risk mutually assured destruction of the worst kind, notwithstanding the change in geopolitical realities. The illogical logic of MAD, as I said before, is as relevant to South Asia as it is to Europe and across the Atlantic and the Pacific. The Indian gung-ho leadership may certainly like to remember that Pakistan does not have a no first use policy. And therefore, there should never ever be a doubt in anyone's mind, friend or foe, that Pakistan's operationally ready nuclear capability enables every Pakistani leader the liberty, the dignity, and the courage to look straight into the Indian eye and never blink. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Jaspal, for a comprehensive overview of South Asia's strategic landscape and educating the audience on strategic stability contours of South Asia and emerging threats in this challenging time, and also explaining how the full spectrum deterrence is maintaining the strategic stability in South Asia. With that, now I would request Professor Jaspal for his remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very good morning. Sorry. Janasa, with your permission, I would like to thank the Institute of Regional Studies for my remarks of giving me opportunity to share my view on changing geopolitical reality. Janasa has very comprehensively elaborated the developments as well as what is our strength. It gives us a strength that despite the immense transformation in the global policy, ideological, political, strategic, Pakistanis are confident about their deterring capability. There are four important points which I would like to highlight. Let me start by saying on 24 February 2022, Russians started a military operation in Ukraine. It was a continuity of the Bucharest Nuclear Summit held in 2008. That these developments were, if you trace it, go back there. But on 27th February, two things happened. First, President Putin announced the nuclear alertness, but at the same time in the German parliament, German Chancellor announced that they are going to, use the word changing world, immense change. And he announced 100 billion euros input in the German defense system and ending a detente with the with the US Russian Federation, which was constituted in 1991. Then, when we look further, let's say if we can go fast forward today, it's not incorrect to say that we are hearing the echo of the Cuban Missile Crisis in Europe as well as in Asia, in our neighborhood. Why I'm saying it? On 10th July 2024, NATO summit in Washington agreed, Germans and the Americans agreed to deploy 3 categories of the missiles, SM-6, Tomahawk with a 1,500-kilometer range in Germany, and develop 1,700-kilometer range supersonic, hypersonic missile to deploy in the Germany again by 2026. With this, the entire Russian heartland is vulnerable. And follow-up, I think in the last week of July, President Putin made a speech in Pittsburgh while addressing the forces. He referred these missiles deployment in the Europe, and at the same time, he compared another development that was what we call it a Typhoon missile systems deployment in Philippines. That's why I was saying that the echo of that is also in Asia. When the Typhoon was deployed in April 2024, the follow-up was that it was a military drill, but then now it's extended, it's the systems deployment. So what the President Putin said, he gave a reference that these missiles deployment in Germany, in Philippines, in Denmark, it's a reflection of what we call a fishing missiles, which was deployed in Europe in 1979 with aiming to decapitate the former Soviet Union leadership. Recently, the Chinese, in the beginning, in April, didn't respond, but now the Chinese foreign minister categorically in this recent meeting at a forum with the Philippines referred this missile as a big challenge because it's a very interesting, the Typhoon system or the launchers, what the American literature says is a medium range missile launchers, and what the Chinese are saying, intermediate range. So that's the way how the things are unfolding in their neighborhood. My third point in this context is, if you see since 2022, 23, and 24, 3 NATO summits, they give us a clear picture of Asian foray of the NATO. In the last summit, I mean the last month, South Korean, Japanese, Australian, and Japanese, they participated, New Zealand, sorry, participated in the NATO summit. And there, if you read the NATO declaration, this says the Quad type organizations are important for NATO security. That leads us to, in my region, own 2 important things. Quad, and that is the strengthening of the, what we call it, Indo-US strategic threshold alliance. Journalists have very rightly pointed out that compulsion, Americans' compulsion. That's the confirmation what the journalists have said. In April 2023, the Congress Committee on Communist Party recommended India must be made a member of NATO Plus. But in June 2023, the Indians expressed that they are not prepared for NATO Plus. But interestingly, they are getting everything in that context. On 26th July, last month, I mean 2024, there was a bill was, you can say, tabled in the US Senate, and its title was US-India Defense Cooperation Act of 2024. This act, if you read this bill, That gives you an idea how the Americans are struggling to engage India in this context. And if you read the articles of this act, I understand it will be not approved in this year because Congress will be going on leave, but again, March, it will be tabled. It very categorically where they talked about the sharing of the defensive equipment, emerging technologies, and checking anything which go against India's interest in the strategic environment. So it means that they are categorically making India, in their word, to check China, in our word, bully of the region. And for checking a bully, you need your own muscle to be strengthened. So in this context, of course, general impression is that S-400 missiles or whatever is coming from the Russia to India, it will be going to multiply Indian power, to check China, or to strengthen Americans' interest in the Middle East, because there's a new architecture of the Middle Eastern strategic environment. Definitely, whatever they are looking, I think these global realities I just summed up in front of you, they all are not constructive for Pakistan's national interest. In that context, when we look about this full spectrum deterrence, interestingly, in the full spectrum deterrence, as I pointed out, strategic, operational, tactical, for the sake of the credibility of the deterrence, here, everyone is talking about Pakistan's this statement or these weapons development or nurses development, but no one is looking toward what is the reality. Foreign Affairs journals published in last month, and this month article, they said the Trump, the presidential candidate, his close people who may be the part of if he win the next administration, they are talking about nuclear tests in the near future. Satellite imagery shows China, Russia, and American nuclear test sites are partially prepared for a new round of nuclear tests. America's Nuclear Posture Review, which is setting a scene of released in October 2022, categorically states miniaturization, new generations of the weapon. When they talk about the modernizations of the weapon, it's not that existing weapon means, it means replacing old weapons with a new generation of the weapon. So this is a trend in the nuclear environment. I think Pakistan is conscious, and when I was listening Journal Saab's speech, it gives me confidence that we are not ignored. But at the same time, it also alarms me that the developments in the global geopolitics, they are so fast, so rapid, that where you have an echo of Cuban Missile Crisis, an echo of the Cold War, there's again an echo of that after almost 30 years or 32 years, new nuclear round of testing will be going to start. I mean, with the Russians and the Americans, which will be going to pollute the entire world's strategic environment, and Pakistan needs to be continuously, consciously keeping an eye on these developments and refurbishing with its limited resources of its full spectrum deterrence. I do not recommend we just start going for an arms race, but at the same time, my humble submission is a full spectrum deterrence till the time, I mean capability of Pakistan, till the time it is able to maintain a balance of terror with India, our nuclear posture will be a guarantee of our survival, decent survival, or a guarantee to check India's military adventurism, which it did on Balakot 26 February 99, as journalists have pointed out, and then was a swift response. The echo of similar kind of the threat were expressed recently in India. Prime Minister Modi, what is his government? His government is only because of his coalitions, six seats. The opposite, India, with the India name coalition, need 8 seats to topple his government. He's once again has started same kind of a threats, anti-Muslim, anti-Pakistan. And when he went for a Qadr celebration recently, I mean the last week or last month, last week of July, he again said, we will be going to conduct surgical strike. But I think it will be a mere rhetoric. Why? Because they are aware where Pakistan is standing and how we are managing it. Where is the fear? General Saab has said, 5th generations of the warfare. Within the 5th generation or a hybrid warfare, there are different layers. Where you go for a kinetic, Pakistan is seen, or General Saab's speech confirms that we are prepared. But where is non-kinetic, where these other layers comes like social media, like others, like new generation perceptions, like literature influence, we all read the English literature and we don't know what is happening in that part of the world. So literal colonization, the other misperception, and this transformation in the sort of things, definitely there we need to focus more. Pakistan full spectrum deterrence, it's good at the kinetic level, excellent at the strategic level. I mean, kinetic come tactical, and giving us a space to think judiciously and fill the gap on the non-kinetic level. Thank you very much, General Saab. It's an excellent.
Thank you, Professor Saab. Now the floor is open for questions and comments. I would request the students to please introduce if they have any question and to be very and ask very precise and to the point questions, please.
Assalamualaikum. I'm an Shai from Khalid University, DSS department. I have a question that we know that Bangladesh is a small country in South Asia, but do you think that the conditions in Bangladesh in any way disturb the strategic stability of South Asia, considering the point that the situation may escalate to a civil war, as right now the threat imposed by is the youth purge? So do you think that this can somehow relate to the strategic stability, or it may disturb the stability of South Asia because the conditions both harsh now?
I think that developments in Bangladesh, you have to keep in mind, in my presentation, I also highlighted non-kinetic politics. What is the significance of Bangladesh? Bangladesh is a member among the Pakistan CPAC, Bangladesh corridor, with the what we call it China's CRI. So the increasing influence of the Chinese in that area is very disturbing for the other states. A stable government, whether we like it or not, though there are a number of these things, has created this problem. The instability in Bangladesh is an instability for the entire region, like instability in Pakistan. And it will creating a space how you can permit the external forces intervene. But it also a reflection on the other side. Hasina Wajid is a very pro-Indian Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Her party is very pro-Indian. Within the region, Bangladesh was very close to India, but these developments indicate India is completely isolated in this. So you see its relation with its neighbor. Everywhere you will find that there is a difference and problem. Though these people went to the oath-taking ceremony, in New Delhi, when Modi took a third new oath, but now the developments in the case will be. My final point here is, Bangladesh is also part of their where the naval assets of the Indian, from where they moved on it, and its history. So that is the point where we need to keep in mind how the 8 submarines which we are developing there in that part, they will be going to pose a challenge to somebody else or to us. And there comes our point, full spectrum that we have to keep in mind from A to Z on all these developments, though kinetic and non-kinetic have a mixture, but when you elaborate them, it looks like.
So as I'm taking the advantage of your presence, I just wanted to ask a question from you. That we have talked about the full spectrum deterrence. I just wanted to know how India views this full spectrum deterrence and the international community as well, how effective it is, because we have been talking about the importance that it has resulted in maintaining the strategic stability in South Asia, but how India views it.
I think in my talk, I explained the effect, basically the effect of Pakistan nuclear capability, which is articulated through the policy of full spectrum deterrence, which implies all the strategic operation, tactical possession of weapons, and the effects that full spectrum deterrence has generated on the Indian military options. If you recall what I said, that gradually over the last, I traced the history of the last about 5 decades, and the gradual erosion of the options in various, the type of war, the scale of war, the type of operations that they can conduct, progressively they have gone down. They've been curtailed. The Indian military's options of aggression against Pakistan or operations against Pakistan from the eastern border. And since that has happened, you can make a judgment as to what is the effect on the Indian and how do they view it. They take it seriously, obviously. Pakistan's nuclear capability is taken very seriously by India. And ever since 98, or even if you go back even in 1987, 90, you can see a progressive regression on the political front, on the coercive policy that used to be followed earlier on. Those are gone. The military options of blitzkrieg tactics, etc., those are gone. Now they've been reduced to what I said was a dynamic response strategy, which is just the bringing back based on the old formula of strategic strikes. So imagine in 4 decades' time, what has the nuclear capability articulated through full spectrum deterrence had the effect on the Indian political, military options and responses. And that answers that question, how do they view it? They view it very seriously. They take it very seriously and they're trying to find ways around how to go around it. But the reality, on ground reality is that there is a nuclear capability of Pakistan. And there's a ground reality is that there's a nuclear capability of India. And therefore there's a strategic balance. And when there's a strategic balance, the options of fighting direct wars is almost closed. And when it is closed, this is the view that Indians probably take. If you read the Indian, even military chiefs talk sometimes, so you take away the bluster part of it in those talks. But the reality is that they take Pakistan's nuclear capability seriously, full spectrum seriously, and therefore they feel terribly, hindered in the kind of open operational options they used to have when conventional asymmetry used to prevail. It prevails even today. But the great equalizer is the full spectrum deterrence capability nuclear capability. And therefore, Indian viewpoint, when they look at it, is that they take it very seriously.
My name is Ehsan and I'm working for CIS Islamabad. My question is related to testing of nuclear weapons. As Dr. Jaspal talked about Project 2025 of America, I believe if that happens, then India will go for a thermonuclear test. What will be Pakistan's strategy then, if that happens?
Let the American elections take place. You'll see what kind of a government comes back, Republican or Democrat. Because on this, there are, I think, nuances and differences on approach. And what in a chain kind of a reaction, we're asking, India will, of course, take its opportunity. Maybe China takes its opportunity. So it's really difficult to predict. But one thing I can tell you very clearly, and that is that you will not find Pakistan lagging behind or going through a dilemma of the 1998 type. I think things will be very clear. The Pakistani mind has over 25, 30, 26 years. I think there's a greater clarity on how to look after your own interests.
Sir, I'm Adil Kazmi. I'm a scholar of PhD in School of Politics and International Relations, Khalid University, sir. My question is that despite India's history of ambivalence on strategic issues since Bhabha Nehru era to its current doctrine on deterrence and escalation dominance, it has twice crossed the nuclear Rubicon and has engaged in nuclear proliferation, which contravened strict non-proliferation norms since 1974. Why does India enjoy more credibility regarding its de facto nuclear status and receives favorable treatment from NSG and US vis-a-vis Pakistan? Your comments, sir.
Answer is not very difficult. India has a certain standing. India has a certain standing for a variety of reasons in the international community, and that has grown in stature since 90s. There's a complete reversal of Indian policy, and the inherent strengths which Indian polity has, Indian economy has, Indian position, global positions, regional position. These are very obvious factors because of which India has been wooed for the last 20 years, and the Americans, the West, etc., especially since the rise of China is linked with that. And that is a common as a denominator and a common concern of India and the rest of the international community, which is not neutral or not pro-China. So India's position, you can take the example, it can get away with a lot of things like Israel. They can get away with a lot of things simply because India is needed and almost a part of the alliance, of the Western alliance. He says they're offering some kind of a NATO plus status, etc. So it has come that close. And then I also said that the Americans have gone so far in backing up India and enticing India into their camp that it has almost become a compulsion for them now to make sure that India retains its strategic value. It is getting away with, literally it is getting away with murder in Canada, in USA, in UK, and the West looks the other side. Can you imagine if this had been done by somebody else, Pakistan, Iran, someone? All hell would have been let loose. So India has now gone into the very smartly. They have not left the Russian camp, but they have also managed to become a necessity for the West. Context economy, context size, context China, etc. So there's no way that the West would be critical of India in any way. Simply, it's almost like, they would not be critical of France and Germany or Italy, of the NATO partners. So India is now becoming a partner. Why would they be critical of that? They'll get away with a lot of things. We should understand this is the ground reality.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. My name is Mashal Shah Nawaz. I'm a student of strategic and nuclear studies at NDU, and I am currently interning for the Iran program at IRS. Sir, recently we see that India has been advancing its military space-based capabilities. For example, the Mission Shakti ASAT test in 2019 and the establishment of the Defense Space Agency and the ongoing talks of developing an Indian military space-based doctrine. To what extent would this lead to a space race in South Asia and lead to nuclear entanglement in the region? And how would this impact Pakistan's national security? Thank you.
I think that India, yes, you are correct, has been increasing its military capabilities, but within the space capabilities, India has only anti-satellite weapon test. That was in April 2019. But apart from that, we do not hear anything. India is relying more on the Americans, especially in the case of BICA, agreement which they had a BICA for the, you can say, spatial information sharing. Generally, India talks a lot that it is in the space, it's doing these satellites, but not practicing. But where is the point? The point is that Americans and the India signed an agreement last year in January. According to that agreement, both will cooperate in the artificial intelligence and the other relevant technologies, emerging technologies. And India is more emphasizing how to perfect this missile defense system. Practically, it's not workable in the region, but at the moment, but India claims a lot. The missile defense systems, where if you integrate and integrate artificial intelligence of these, they increase the speed of the weapon, lethality of the weapon, accuracy of the weapon. That generates a hope. But still, Americans are lagging behind in these kind of things. And second, the space capability, military capabilities, space is today used for military information. That's why I say militarization. But it is not weaponized. To date, it is not weaponized. Americans tried to develop a satellite 37B satellite for a missile beds, but they did not deploy. India, if exaggerating that, it's not workable. So in that context, of course, we are keeping an eye that if they are going into space, because in space technology, its missile defense system or its other missile capability will multiply. But at the same time, it is not going to pose a much, or you can say, destabilizing challenge to Pakistan. Look, it's a wrong way of. That's why I said that we only read the literature which is produced in the West. We have to take the other literature. The good example for you as a researcher is that there was an interview and an article published by the Don Meashamer, who is the author of the Offensive Realist, or what we call it, Great Power Strategy. Read that. According to him, in 2008, when there was a Bucharest summit, the NATO decided to make a member Ukraine, Georgia. The Russians protested that it's our backyard, it's our area of influence, please don't go forward. Immediately, the Russians invaded, they captured 2 provinces of the Georgia, and Georgia was formed. Then they came in 2014, captured Crimea, and the Ukraine's chances were minimized. But then in 2024, when they start, Russians only say it's a military operation. We say it's a war. But in that context, of course, Russia is not dragged in an asymmetrical warfare, and it is not in its advantage. That's why NATO is not going to directly hit. That's the reason in my presentation I said that the development of this year, July, is a missile bases in Germany, new missiles. Second is Germany first time agreed to provide a space for a training of the Ukrainian forces. And then it will be part of $42 billion assistance to the Ukraine. Now, here is a question. What the Russians say, they say that if the NATO uses military muscle, which is provide a weapon which is going to hit the heartland of Russia, they will be going to retaliate. So NATO is not giving. Chinese proposed, and that's why Pakistan, China, and some other BRIC countries did not participate in Swiss Peace Conference last month. At that time, what was the Chinese proposal? They said, if you are convening a peace conference with Russia on Ukraine, Russia shall be part of that. But the Europeans or the Americans are not desiring. The reason is very clear. The Americans desires NATOization of Europe, whereas this was a term used by the President Biden in May 2022. He said Russia wanted to Finlandization of the Europe. We added now NATOization of the Europe. So it's in the advantage of the Americans. That's why there is $1 billion military industrial complex getting the contracts. So this war can end immediately. But the Americans' interest in the Europe does not permit it. So definitely, or a realist paradigm indicates this war is required for the rejuvenation of the alliance's politics and strengthening the military industrial complex. So that's why this is an asymmetrical warfare. The NATO is not going to participate directly, indirectly, yes. The day NATO has now agreed to give the Ukrainians F-16s coming from the Netherlands or these countries, part of the NATO, if these aircrafts fly and cross the Ukrainian-Russian border, the situation will be entirely different.
Thank you very much, everyone. Now we have come to the conclusion of this session today. Now I would request Dr. Zafar, Senior Research Fellow, for vote of thanks.
Thank you, Brian. First of all, I would like to thank to General Kidwai and Professor Jaspal for their very holistic, all-encompassing, insightful, full of knowledge, comments, talk. And I believe all of you sitting here must have learned a lot of things from it. Highlighting some of the points that they highlighted already, what concerns we as Pakistan is institutionalization of Hindutva, what is happening under the Modi regime. And that is why we see a more aggressive posture from Indian side towards Pakistan. But at the same time, I would like to highlight Indian themselves, they have rejected this because you can see what majority, I mean, minority votes. He has been successful to make a government, but that is a fragile government. They also highlighted Balakot, aggressive posture again. But what India is sticking in recent time is fifth generation warfare. They know that militarily they cannot compete with Pakistan because Pakistan's armed forces, highly professional. We have the full capability of responding them, but they have gone to another dimension, which is fifth generation warfare. General Zafar very aptly mentioned. There is a psychological glitch with human psychology. If we hear one lie 11 times, we start believing this is true. This is what India exploited. Even the marketing, they use the same technique. They keep telling you the thing, and we are convinced to buy that product. Indians, they keep telling lies about Pakistan, about CPAC, Pakistan's progress, through the Indian Chronicles, which was exposed later on. Information operations. So all these, you can look at that. India has gone to another dimension of fifth generation warfare, and Pakistan is trying to counter that Indian influence because these days, what we believe is this is a war of narratives. Whoever has a stronger narrative, a convincing narrative, he or she in a country in a better position to put their narrative to the rest of the world. India's inclusion into Quad, I2U2, India's signing of agreements like Professor Saab also mentioned, Becca, Limova, Kamkasa, and beyond that, Indo-US nuclear deal back in 2005, all these are examples that how India is being touted as a rising power. But in reality, what India is, you can see in the post-Pulwama, when we had captured, our Air Force very aptly responded them. Now, in these circumstances, General Saab, also once again, I would like to highlight the geopolitical realities, China's rise and shift of power from unilateralism to multilateralism, unipolar world to multipolar world. These are the indicators that the United States is losing its that hegemony once again, and its hegemony is under threat. Now it is making alliances all over the world. Both of the eminent speakers, they mentioned alliances as well, starting from east to the west. But what happens under these circumstances where India is empowered, Pakistan's national security directly, indirectly comes under threat. Some of the quarters in India, they call of limited warfare. let me tell you, limited warfare, the mantra of limited warfare is itself flawed, because once the war begins, it cannot stay limited. It can expand, it can escalate. So there are some jingoisms in Indian quarters who are thinking that there should be an escalation with Pakistan. But once again, Pakistan's nuclear weapons, which are guarantee Pakistan's national security and Pakistan's responsibility to maintain strategic stability in South Asia as a responsible nuclear power, are the evidence that Pakistan wants peace and stability in the region. There is, once again, both of the speakers highlighted global power politics as well. American philosopher who says, if you want to defeat America, make America blind. It means just put American technology to pause, or you can jam through a cyber attack. American forces are actually trained to fight through technology. If they are not using technology, they can be easily overpowered. So there is always a response to anything, any technology in the world that has a response to them. China is doing very aptly to that. Once again, instead of going further, I would like to say once again, highlighting maintaining peace and stability in the South Asia guarantees the regional peace as well as global peace. And please, I would like to request all of you to join me in thanking both of our eminent speakers. Let's give it a big round of applause.
I would request Rizwan sir